State and national politics and policies affect education at every level, and middle-level education has been especially vulnerable to the changing tides of politics. At the state level, perhaps the two most influential elements of policy are related to teacher licensure and the curriculum. In many states, the middle school movement has made progress in both areas. For example, many states now have specialized middle-level teacher licensure or endorsement. Also, many states have a curriculum that is divided into elementary, middle, and high school levels.
McEwen stated that such policies and organizations
carry the message that there are three distinct levels in American public education.
He also mentioned that many district and state departments now have support for individuals to work specifically with middle-level teachers and curriculum.
On the other hand, policies at the national level have not been so friendly to middle-level education. Lipsticks recognize that
major national bills like Title I and No Child Left Behind reorient our schools. They deflect us for better and for worse onto a different trajectory.
More specifically, Sue Swaim discussed that America's largest single education act, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, completely ignores schooling that happens at the middle level.
Toepfer stated,
"A persisting national problem is that the United States Department of Education has never recognized middle schools and lists all of the nation's schools as either elementary or secondary."
He called this
an anachronistic, misinformed stance,
stating that the evidence is clear that
a middle school unit can better address the educational needs of young adolescents.
The implications of this act and its most recent iteration, the No Child Left Behind Act, are deep and far-reaching in middle schools.
Sue Swaim explained that NCLB has mandated that grades 3 through 8 be the testing grades, and
that means that over 60% of the kids tested are middle school kids.
In other words, she maintained
the success of the mandate rests squarely on the shoulders of middle school students and middle school educators, even though they are not formally recognized in the law. Furthermore, since middle level or middle school is not mentioned in NCLB, Swaim further lamented that it is difficult to obtain specific funds for middle level needs in areas such as reading or science. George echoed Swaim's observation.
Virtually every state in the country provides less money to funding young adolescents than it does for young children or young adults. So middle schools have been crippled all along by being literally less money per child than other levels of education.
Swaim also explained that federal research data does not support a disaggregation for researchers who might be interested in studying the effectiveness of middle schools. Of course, NCLB also has disturbing implications for defining quality teaching. George argued that the NCLB
mystical interpretation of highly qualified teachers is making it very difficult for states to produce teachers who can teach more than one subject.
He called this a
giant step backward.
Similarly, McEwen expressed concern that NCLB communicates that
all the emphasis should be on content knowledge and nothing else is important.
In his words, NCLB defines highly qualified teacher as a teacher who has a degree in something, does not have a criminal background, and can pass a state-approved content test. He protested.
It really irks me to hear highly qualified being defined as those very minimal criteria.
The concerns raised by these participants and others are related to their commitment to high-quality, specialized middle-level teacher preparation, which seems to be completely discounted by NCLB.
In addition to narrowly defining highly qualified teacher, NCLB has also narrowly defined student success. Lipsticks characterized the testing issue broadly.
It's not a small technical issue, it's an enormous question about public accountability.
Lipsticks, Gatewood, and others discuss the difficulty of schools, teachers, and students to balance their values with public accountability. Lipsticks warned that
this country is in danger of losing its commitment to public education.
However, many of our participants have observed that this balancing act is not going particularly well. For example, Stevenson recounted being in a school.
The last schools I was in, teachers were running so afraid of their kids' performance on tests that all they were doing was drilling them and grilling them to try to get them to come up with the right answers. And as my friend John Arnold says, it's a preoccupation with getting them to answer questions they haven't asked. And there's a lot in that statement about the importance of building schooling around the questions and curiosities and interests that children have.
Lipsick seemed to suggest that we cannot merely reject the entire notion of public accountability. Rather, we must offer alternatives, ways to demonstrate that the time young adolescents spend in our schools adds value to their individual lives and adds to the cohesion of our democratic society. She worried that failure to do so might lead to a rejection of the
Jeffersonian ideal of taking children from all quarters and using the public coffers to educate them.
Her appeal seems to be related to the point made about middle-level teacher education. Perhaps all teacher education and all public education are in jeopardy. We must work within the ranks of middle-level education to ensure our continued survival, and we must also lift our heads to work with others within our larger ranks. We must secure alliances and allegiances to protect the larger educational agenda as well.
In other words, if teacher education and public education fail, middle-level education will likely collapse with them. If teacher education and public education endure, the middle-level education has a good fighting chance.
George discussed the larger context of the political environment which has fostered policies such as NCLB.
I believe that ultra-conservatives in America are opposed to the concepts and the values that lie at the heart of middle school education, and that those people are doing basically everything they can to drive out the kinds of things that middle school education stands for. And we're in a tremendous struggle, certainly for the rest of this decade and maybe forever, to try and keep the middle school concept alive and to keep the light of middle school education on during a period that I perceive to be growing darker and darker, with people whose views about human nature are dark, people whose views about human potential are dark, people who believe in accountability, people who don't trust, people who want to monitor and supervise and test. Those are the people that threaten the middle school concept in 2003 and beyond. Those are the people who don't believe in integrating the academic disciplines. Those are the people who don't believe that curriculum can actually spring from the needs of young adolescents themselves. Those are the people who believe that curriculum needs to come from on high somewhere, that people who've already learned and taken power should decree what young people need to know for the future. Those are the threats to middle school today.
Paul George and Sue Swaim challenged their middle-level counterparts and descendants. Swaim urged,
Middle-level advocacy at the local, state, and national levels is important, and every one of us has a role to play in accomplishing that. About the accountability movement, George stated emphatically,
I think we should reject it, reject it, reject it, and reject it. And I think we should do it loudly and angrily and publicly.
He also stated,
We've got to get political. We've got to support candidates who understand and support quality, enlightened education rather than narrow, punitive, negative, and hostile approaches to education.
In Paul George style, he credited Sam Houston, a Texas pioneer, with providing great advice for middle-level educators.
We've got to do right and damn the consequences.